So, good morning and welcome, podcasters, to Sexplosion. My name is Caroline Chenier and I'm your coach on all things intimacy, relationship, sex, and superconsciousness. This is my podcast teaching you about how to sexually liberate yourself to be confident, spicy, and fun around intimacy and sex, along with learning about how to build a great foundation for strong, long lasting, and passionate relationships. It is unfiltered, uncensored, and extremely unexpected. Today's topic is all about sex growing up. My wonderful guest, Marilyn Burt, has been on before, and we were talking about sexuality at work. But we've both had an upbringing which is of a religious nature. So we're going to be discussing sex growing up, what it was like, and how the effects of this exposure shapes our lives. So, welcome once again to Marilyn. Thank you for coming again.
Welcome. Hello. Nice to be here. Great to get back on the subject again.
Okay, so last time we were here, Marilyn, you had quite a lot more that you wanted to say. Our time on Sexplosion the last time wasn't long enough to discuss everything that you wanted to discuss about this. So I'd like you to please start by telling us what was it that you were dying to say about sex and growing up?
Yeah, so we're talking about sex in the workplace and affairs and how you can get into relationships in the workplace. And so the workplace for me comes directly after being at school. Like, well, obviously, sorry, I went to university as well, but if I think about it, that's a higher education. It's still sort of an education system. So we're kind of always in a group situation, if you know what I mean, or a situation where you're familiar with the other, colleagues, students, whatever it might be. And because we spend a lot of our time in these places, we generally find that we'll get attracted to people or we'll start talking to people, and the sexuality aspects come into your life wherever you are. You can't avoid it. It's part of who we are, type thing. And so for me, I went to Catholic schools all of my life. And so my first part of my education was in a private school. A private in Australia means it's paid for. It's not like public. I think it's the opposite way around here in England. So I had private education at a Catholic primary school, which was grade 1 to grade 7, so till you're about 12 years old before you go into high school. And we only have sort of a 2-part system in Australia. And the second 6, well, it's actually 5 years of high school in Queensland, is I went to a private school, girls only though. And so that was a real differentiator in myself, my upbringing, what I was allowed to do, what was expected of me even. And equally, like, not being with people, like when you go to university and work, like boys or whichever sex you're oriented towards, makes it difficult to have probably an effective baseline to create a relationship from, maybe. And I think there's limitations there that we'll get onto as we talk about today, the impact of what that was growing up as an adolescent in a Catholic environment.
Yeah, see, I went to Sunday school until I was about 11 years old, and sex wasn't even talked about. However, what is really strange is that I learned that it was dirty. I learned that it's not something that you talk about, and I learned that I don't know how, but obviously as a child, as a what, a 4-year-old child, in my mind, I made a decision that you're not allowed to enjoy it either. So of course, I'd be doing it and thinking, oh, I'm not unconsciously thinking, oh, I'm not really supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to
Mm.
be. And of course, it was all supposed to be sex before marriage as well. Of course, I ignored that because I actually thought that was ridiculous. But how can you possibly, well, I say that I know there are a lot of religions where you're not allowed to have any sex before you're actually married, like in the Indian culture, for example.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like, how could I possibly marry someone without testing them out? It's like anything. You buy a car, you test it first, don't you?
And some of that is also related to maybe the time that we grew up as well, because sexuality has become a little bit more open in society and conversation, I think, and people are more aware that, we need to talk about the things that were taboo in those days. And so, I grew up in the 70s, and my parents were older generation as well. They had me late in, well, my mum was older when I was born. She was almost 40, um, so some of those things, like mum being Catholic, my dad wasn't Catholic, but my mum was. And so her values from her family come forward with her about, bringing up a child and bringing, how to parent a child, how to keep the child in the guardrails of Catholic religion, and also how to stay on the strictness that they were brought up with. My mum was born in 1932, and so they grew up through the Depression as well. So it was very strict. Their parents were very strict. My parents were strict as well. So those type of I guess strict guidelines and rules prevent you from actually being free, from being able to be liberated, like we were just talking about, and prevent you from even talking about subjects. It's just like, you just don't do this. Like you said, even
Yeah.
at school, it's like, it's forbidden. It's like, it's not, don't go there, don't have this discussion. And therefore you don't have an awareness of what to do and an expectation of that you can enjoy it.
No, and do you know what's really interesting is that in our school, in our junior school, so that's from 7 years old to 10 years old before going to the big school, there was this table tennis table, and we were 9 and 10 at the time. And I don't know what it was about that time, but when you went under the table tennis table, you kissed. People would snog, right?
Yeah,
Under
yeah.
the tongues and everything. It's a real time for exploration for children in general, I think. And so I remember actually at 7 years old, I remember experimenting with my best friend, like kissing on the lips, and we just went like that to see what it felt like. And that was
Mm,
the first time I'd
mm,
kissed anybody. And it's funny, it's my friend, now, I did, and I didn't even think about, it should be a man or anything like that, for then.
no.
It was just playing. It was like testing. And then the next time was this under the table tennis table. And I remember, because you're not supposed to do stuff like that,
Mm,
I wouldn't go under there, and they were dragging me. The boys used to try and drag me under there, and I was like, no way I'd go there. And I remember when I was 13 years old, we went to a party, and I remember the mother was quite, she was not a drug addict, but she did take drugs, and but she didn't appear to be a drug addict. But I think she had problems that it was kind of masking her problems. She drank as well. So she let us all do whatever we wanted to do. And I remember I went deliberately with a pair of jeans, tight jeans, with a zip and everything. I want to make sure that zip was up. I don't know why I would think that, but I tell you what, there was one room where everybody was going into and coming out going, "Ooh," like that, and I knew what was going on in there, and there was no way on this earth I was gonna go in that room. And I never knew what was going on, but the older sister of the girl whose party it was in there, and I just thought, so I was, like, thinking, "God, I'm keeping my zip up." It's like it was ingrained in me that
mhm,
this was a bad thing.
mhm,
Isn't that just? And I tell you what, Marilyn, I've got TikTok. I'm very happy and very proud to say I'm now number one. I'm the number one intimacy coach on TikTok with nearly 17,000 followers, and it's incredible. And the point of me telling you that is because I am very frank on that channel, and I say it as it is. And considering it was something that was so taboo, we never spoke about it. I'm actually the complete opposite now, and I speak my truth.
mm,
And what I'm coming to here is that I talked about self orgasm, and I was saying that at
mm,
7 years old, I was in a swimming pool, because our school had put a new swimming pool in. I was going around the edge like that, and suddenly there's a jet of water that came out, and it felt really nice, Marilyn. I just
mm,
thought, ooh, and it came and it got to the point, it was like, oh, it was all like this, and I was only 7 years old, but I had no idea what was going on. I
mm.
just knew it was a very amazing feeling. And it's only years later I realised it was an orgasm. And so, people on the channel, I mean, most people are saying, "Oh yeah, God, that happened to me." Some people were younger, some people were 8 years old, but some people are saying, "Nah, you couldn't have been 7. No, that's not true," or whatever. It's like, well, it is true, and it did happen to me, but yeah, it's not something that I thought was bad, isn't it? So
Yeah,
you see
and
what I
it
mean? Because it's an actual thing, and because we never talked about sex, I didn't even think that was something that was supposed to be to do with that. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, and interesting you say that because one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this subject as well is like when you are at school, and you touched on it yourself earlier about the tennis table, table tennis, and when I remember also being at our primary school, which is junior school here, is you did go out with someone, there was boyfriends and girlfriends, or you did kiss at behind the school thing or whatever. There was this,
Yeah.
you did go to a place to try to kiss or to test it out. It was like, and and you had, and it became a thing, as in like, if you hadn't kissed, you were almost like picked on by other kids kind of thing. So you were kind of very much under this peer pressure to start trying to experience these things, even though we were all aware of it. So even as little children, we were around wanting to kiss or wanting to try it. So, and we didn't have TV back in those days in the early part of my school. So where did that come from? Like it's innate in us as humans, and touching, and or maybe you see adults doing it as well when you're a small child. So it's not something like, I think our society, our culture, our religions have said you can't do this till you hit a certain age. There was like limitations put on what you can and can't do, whereas the natural way of experiencing things actually just happens, and it happens at different times in your life. And I think that's what parents probably need to be more prepared for, is that we all are here predominantly like to have children. Like that's the how the species is going to continue. It's the same as all the animal kingdom as well, right? So, but we've created these rules in society that says this is what you can and can't do, and this is
Mm.
how you will experience sex, and this is what a woman, and then expectation of a woman is. And even at school, like we were taught in primary school, you need to represent the school. So whether that be within the school or outside of the school. So no kissing, no meeting people, no hanging out in street corners, no, like there were all these things about not congregating as a group or holding hands or being seen in public doing things that might bring some reputational damage back to the school. But kids will be kids. You're sitting on a bus, you hold hands. Kids hold hands playing in the playground, just generally like groups or whatever. So naturally, you're starting to experience holding hands with a boy, not just a girl or what. Well,
Yeah.
it's different orientations nowadays. So whatever you feel like you're attracted to. But those things are there, like sort of telling us it's bad. Like you said, it's not, you're not allowed to do it, and that whole fear of having that discussion as a parent and a child, or even in a school, t- kind of like, it's such a problem because we're going to do it anyway. As children, we're going to try and experience and get into situations, and being unprepared because we're scared to talk about it is actually the downfall that we have, because we're not supporting our younger generations.
Not at
That's,
all. And two things there. So the first thing is that kissing was not taboo, was it? I mean, it was on telly, on films.
yeah, true. Yeah.
Right. So that seems to be okay.
Mm.
But I'll tell you, one of my customers, obviously I'm not going to mention who they are, but what happened there was that he was somebody that was switched off. And what I mean by that is that he never wanted to do it with his, he's divorced twice, and both times it was, apart from his ego, like sabotaging the relationship. One of it is that he just didn't want to do it, wouldn't do it, and it was like he didn't have any sex in him at all. And when I delved into his background and memories, this is what happened. So he was 7 years old, and he was experimenting, like we were just talking about, with kissing, and he kissed a girl. He was 7, so it was just like I was describing with my friend, and
Mm.
all his like friends were around him going, "Ooh, you were flirting," like that. He didn't know what flirting meant, but he knew it was something like really good. So he went back home. He spoke to his mum. He said, Mum, I kissed a girl today. She said, no, he didn't say that. He said, I flirted with a girl today. She said, you did what? Don't you dare do that. And she berated him, and she absolutely annihilated him. And from that moment onwards, he would never look at girls. He would never speak to girls in that way. He would never, ever. So when it came to his relationships, he was told he wasn't supposed to do that, but he didn't know that he could switch it back on again when he's in a relationship. So
Mm.
literally, it's like he switched something off, and then it would never ever come back again. And to this day, this man has a lot of trouble when he works on his childhood experiences, when he does his meditations, that it comes back. He can't even come. He can't even come. He can go for a long time and not
Mm.
come. It doesn't hurt him either.
Mm.
But it's a real shame because, he will never ask. He will never ask. He waits for, and his poor wives, they went off. And it's to the point where he can't even have children. So he
Yeah.
can't have children. It's almost like he switched everything off. So that's very sad, isn't it? And that is purely down to
Mm.
one incident where he was told off for flirting.
Yeah. And I think that's the damage that we need to recognize. That there's lots of, I guess, programs, or certainly I know, like Dr. Rada here on Radio 1, I think it is, where they have a Sunday session. They allow students like that. It's for inviting students and people to come on and ask questions about sexuality and stuff. And so people love those things, like you're talking about on TikTok as well. I assume a lot of your followers are actually quite young as well, and they're
No,
looking
they're all
for
ages.
people. Yeah, of course, but there will be a portion of people that are young as well. And
Yeah,
when you're
yeah, yeah.
young, you're looking for role models, or you're looking for people that can give you information or guidance or their experiences. Like for me also, you talk about self orgasms earlier, and because of the way I was brought up, I I was basically taught, like we talked about, how sex is bad. So, and not you don't enjoy it as a woman. It was not a pleasurable thing. There was no me in my enjoyment of sexuality in the very beginning of time, because it's not what we were taught we were allowed to do. We were taught we were there for business almost, rather than that it's for enjoyment for women. It's enjoyment for men. That was how it kind of was in those days. It was
Yeah,
very,
same.
yeah. And so, there wasn't any, in my early years, there wasn't any self orgasms and that sort of stuff. I didn't touch myself. There wasn't, any um, encouragement or learning to explore my own body, so that's another, I guess, symptom of what occurred. And so that came later, but that also did in my relationships mean that I'm not a person who's been the instigator. I'll wait, like you were just talking about this other friend, I'll wait for that to happen to me, rather than for me to ask for sex or want to have desires to start sex or start intimacy in a relationship.
Or even asking for what you want because you're
Mm.
feeling that you're not supposed to. It's not supposed to be something for pleasure. It's like it's only for children and that
Mm.
you're only allowed to do it for children, but it's not supposed to be a pleasurable thing. But I do remember reading once about, I think it's in the 1800s, if a wife didn't climax, then she couldn't get pregnant. So they'd take the wives to the doctor, and the doctor would make her come. If she could come, then she was able to have children. Did you
Oh,
hear about that
I
one?
didn't hear.
Yeah,
Oh,
but yeah, it's touching on what you were saying earlier. See, so because we are not allowed
mm,
to ask questions, or we're not encouraged, what happens then is that we end up going through life just, excuse the expression, sucking it in see, because you don't even
mm,
realize what your own body's capable of doing. So yeah, like you're saying, a lot of people don't. self-orgasm. They don't, because it's supposed to be like they would say men would go blind if they masturbated. And I do remember once, Marilyn, I've got to tell you this. I was with this young model once for a while. I was 49 and I was 50. I remember I was my 50th birthday. I was with him, and it finished short after that. I was only with him for 6 months, but he was absolutely beautiful. And I remember once I was doing him, like going down on him,
Yeah.
and honestly, a 22-year-old young man. I mean, and experienced woman like me. Obviously, he was having a nice time, and then at the end of it, he goes, oh my God, I can't see, I can't see." I said, "What do you mean you can't see?" He goes, "Oh no, it's okay now, I can see." And so basically, his eyes, he'd been like squeezing his eyes so hard that he couldn't see anymore. And so, in actual fact, that wise old wives' tale is probably true because they squeeze their eyes so much. That was very funny. Um, yeah, so yeah, that was just very interesting. But yeah, so going back to what I was saying, so what happens is that we end up just working through life and just not necessarily experimenting, but finding stuff out as you go along with different people. And it's the same for men, it's not just women, it's the same for
Mm,
men. I mean,
mm,
yeah, they have got more of a license to be able to go out and do what they do, but again, they don't know the woman's body. They don't, because we don't get taught things like the erogenous zones at school. We don't get taught that if you touch around the neck, it's really nice. You just find out by accident or someone tells you. But you see, it's one of those things where I didn't even know about female ejaculation until I was what, 46 years old. It's like, what's all that about? Why aren't we taught about stuff like that before? It's so unfair. I
mm.
missed out for so many years.
Gosh, I just remembered now, like even at university, like when you're, with in a relationship or experiencing things with people, videos, you could get, videos in the early days of sexual encounters, experiences, porn, we call it today, so it was
Debbie
pornographic
Does
material.
Dallas was one.
Oh yeah, I know. It's like you learned by seeing
Yeah.
other things happening, or other, and maybe on TV you're talking about touching on the neck, or in certain zones that trigger some reaction and response in an individual. And you know you learn by seeing on TV. So if we're not talking about it, if children are not being taught about it, I mean, where do you go to find out? You go to pornography sites, you go to places like magazines, and you're relying on things that maybe don't give people necessarily a fully balanced view, because they might be, well, I mean, that's probably subjective really, but what is a balanced view? Because actually sexuality can take you in a whole heap of different directions, but it starts, like, I guess, from exploring, and that's what we're doing when we're children and teenagers. We're exploring and learning, and you're wanting to have that first kiss.
Yeah, and I was going to say something just then. What was it now? Oh, I can't remember what it was going to be now. I should have written it down. But the thing is that what I remember sitting on a beach in South Africa, and there were these young 20-year-old girls. There was between 18 and 26, and we were talking about boyfriends or something, and I don't know how it came about because I talk about this stuff. This is before I was what I do now. So
Yeah.
I've been talking like this for years, way before I started doing it as a career. And these girls were sitting there like that on the beach, absolutely fascinated. They were saying, "We squirt." My mum has never told me that. I said, "Well, your mum won't tell you that because it's not the sort of thing we learn." Oh yeah, I remembered what I was going
Mm,
to say. So yeah, talking about the porn films, you see,
mhm.
I get a lot of messages from women and men from India in a blind panic because they've been told they're getting married in 4 months' time. And these people, the ones I've spoken to anyway, have never really spoken in a flirty way to a woman. They've never kissed a woman, never had anything with a woman. And so what they do, I remember this woman, she wrote to me in a very broken English. She said, "Do I do boobies?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" She says, "Do I let them touch my boobies like in the films?" And I said, Oh my goodness, you're talking about porn films. No, no, that's not how it is. You see, that's what's wrong. Because we don't educate from young, and I don't mean young child, I mean that
Mm,
if generally just talking openly about what's natural between a
mhm,
man and a woman and our bodies, they think porn films, that's the way it is. And
mm,
she was like, that's just hard sex, isn't it? It's just hard. It's not romantic. It's not gentle. It's not, oh, let's, see what you like. Let's see what I like. It's none of that. And I think that it is such a shame for people because they all learn the wrong way, especially
mm.
kids. They're looking at these porn films and there's an expectation now as well. There's an expectation with size, expectation with bodies, expectation with how it should look down there. I don't know if you've seen that sculpture called the Great Wall of Vagina, right?
No, I
This
haven't seen that one.
man
Mm,
sculptured, now when I say sculptured, what I mean that by is that he did plaster casts of women's vaginas, pussies,
yeah.
400 of them, and they're all on a great big thing. And you know what? They look nothing like the ones you see in porno films. They are
Mm,
all. I think I saw one pussy that was
mm,
exactly like the beautiful ones that you see in porn films. And so even that isn't correct, is it? And I tell you what,
yeah.
there are all sorts of shapes and sizes, and nobody looks at their own bits, do they? Because it's not, how many of you get a mirror and have a look down there? Unless there's something wrong, you might look down there, but I mean, otherwise, you'd never look down there. So when you see this great wall of vaginas, you think, wow, and I'm not saying that we should all be shown a load of pussies, but what I'm trying to say is that it was quite shocking seeing that I had never seen that many different types of, and
Yeah.
it's a perfectly natural thing. And the amount of women that have their bits sculptured, the inner lip sculptured because they don't like it. But you see, it's because we watch porn films and we see them
Mm.
all beautiful that they think that's the way it should be, and it's not. It's shocking,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, you're right. It's not necessarily, it's not a great place for education, but there's interesting stuff there as well. And it is fun, and it is, you can incorporate that into your sexual relationships and your
Yeah,
experiences as well.
fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it just gives you that little bit of spice that you were talking about earlier sometimes too, depending on if you and your partner are open to it. And that, again, like you said, it's an open discussion about whether or not that's what you want to do and the kind of role that you want to, the road that you want to go down. And I do, and I do enjoy it, but I don't do it every time. Like sex is different every time you have sex. It's like you're not always going. So let me caveat that because I would actually say I think if you're doing that, you maybe like need to recognize if that's what you do every time that there's something missing, i.e., what are you allowing yourself to enjoy it, or are you relying on something external to actually stimulate you in order to be able to enjoy your own sexual experience with your partner or yourself or whatever it might be. And not to say it's a red flag kind of thing, but just in my experience, I don't use porn every time I'm having sex, but I might just go, oh, this could be fun to do today, and then do that kind of thing. So, and introduce it. But equally, when I was an adolescent or a young teen growing up and not having exposure to that, you I also went to, like I said, a private girls' school that there weren't boys around at school. So I wasn't in a situation where I was being flirted with. So I wasn't getting those experiences in my teenage years. And so when it did come to actually, we'd have an organized dance, like when you're in grade 10, where there was boys came to the school kind of thing, parents came along and was chaperones kind of to allow you to have a night out with boys kind of in a controlled environment. But you just, in my experience, because I was segregated from boys for the majority of my time, I mean, there's a huge benefits in it, obviously, being able to focus and do study and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I missed was actually not having those interactions with boys, so not understanding how to relate to boys, but even because I didn't have boys in my school, when I went to university, I actually found I was very self-conscious in classes. Like I remember the first week of university, I put my hand up and asked a question in class, and a bunch of boys down the front just laughed at me and made a joke of me in the class. And because I'd not been in a school where I was experienced learning with boys, that intimidated me so much. I stopped asking questions in my
So
university
bad.
lectures. I put my hand down because I was afraid of being like ridiculed in front of people because I didn't understand these relationships with boys and girls. And I think it's all well and good to be able to giving me an education separate, but then where do I get that experience? I'm just kind of thrown into it in my adult
Yeah.
years and having to try to figure it out and fit in and do what other people do and just having no idea of what to do. It's quite scary. It's
It
quite
is absolutely. And you know what? I think one of the reasons why I would never go out with an older man, I mean, even my husband now is 14 years younger than me, is because when I used to hear of girls like when they were 18, for example, going out with a 26-year-old, to me that meant you had to do adult things like, you know, and to me it's like, oh no, I couldn't do any of that. That's like and even going out with a man of 40 would expect you to do going down on them and whatever, or letting you. It's like there was no way on this earth I was never ever. And the thing is, you see, because I felt that it was such a dirty thing going down on someone. It was like, you know, I don't mean dirty as in dirt. I mean just,
mm,
you know, sexually unacceptable kind of thing.
yep.
That it would be like a special treat from me. Like I would never, and in fact, if anyone wanted me to do it, I would break up with them because no, that's just too rude. That's just too. It's terrible. I even went to the doctor once, and I said, "Oh, and I tell you why I did that because I remember hearing about a girl who every on the first date, or the first time they slept, that she'd do that." I was like, "Oh my God." What? How come she can do that? It's like I can't do that. It like take me 6 months to do something like that. I went to my doctor and I said, Why can't I do that?" And he laughed at me, which he shouldn't have done, because
Mm,
look, everyone's different. Everyone's different. But of course, what he didn't say to me is like your upbringing has caused you to do that. Obviously, that's why I
mm,
felt like it was such a
mm,
bad thing to do. It's like a perfectly normal thing. I mean, look at the Romans. They
yeah.
had little brothels everywhere. It was it was open, it was acceptable. You could you could do whatever you, and in fact, same gender was
Yeah, yeah.
acceptable then too. I mean, what happened? You know,
Yeah.
the
And
Romans were
also
all Catholics, weren't they?
that's true. Yeah, that brings me to the other point, which is actually, I think, one of the reasons why it's seen as dirty is because prostitution has always been like the oldest profession in the world, right? And but it was always seen as a service to men, and it was a thing that was done, and it was, and so when I grew up, we were always taught society looks down on prostitution. Like I remember even in Australia when they were starting to open up the sex brothels. They're basically brothels, but they were limited to the number of people that you could have. And there was all these rules about how you could have it and how far away from schools and industry and businesses and whatever they had to be in order to have a place where you could go to have sex. But because we've still got these ideas and these things that we pass on, these thoughts about prostitution, and that it's actually not something that you should engage in, like going to I used to go with my ex-husband to clubs where girls would be dancing, like strip clubs in Australia, and that sort of thing was fun and interesting, and there were other women in there. I wasn't the only woman going into these clubs, but it's not seen as something that people do. It's not, it's
No,
very almost hidden away in the back streets of society
it is.
where you're not allowed to go. And so then we make these ideas or these rules or these decisions to say prostitution is bad, i.e. sex is bad. And so
Yeah,
that's why women are prostitutes and women are bad. And that's the, I guess, the stigma that we're battling against as a woman as well, that we can't just enjoy it and have fun, that actually it's bad.
you're absolutely right. And the thing is that that's where, you know, me going to a sex party is bad. If
Mm,
I enjoy sex, then I'm a tart.
Yeah.
And why shouldn't women enjoy it? Why shouldn't I enjoy it? But that's exactly how my mother, I mean, bless her heart, she's doing the right thing. She's doing what she thought was right. It's what she was taught. It's
Mhm.
not her fault. She was right when she said, don't let a man take advantage of you, don't let a man hit you. Yeah, okay, that was all correct. But it was just, I was just made to feel really bad about it all. And you know what, Marilyn? The moment I decided that I was going to just enjoy it, I was with my favourite FB, and I was in this. I'd answered the door in this beautiful lingerie with a big boa. What they call those
Feather boa,
feathery
yeah.
feather boa. Yeah, that's it. Had a
Beautiful.
hair all up, and had loads of makeup on. I wanted to look like a type. I mean, I don't know what was going on with my sexual peak, but I was really, really sexual, and I was really wanted to just
Mm.
rip him apart sexually.
Yeah.
So I opened the door and he saw me and I was like, so I was with him and he was my favourite at the time. He was a right pig, but I didn't care because I just wanted him for one thing as well. And so I was there and I just thought, oh, I'm just going to let myself go. And you know what? It was like electricity was going through me and I suddenly felt all shaky, all my skin was just all tingly all over. And I was like, wow, it's just like fireworks. Why didn't I let myself go before? Eh?
Yeah, I know.
Isn't
I
it a
know.
shame? But
Yeah.
then I think to myself, okay, if I had been like that before, then I would have had nothing to look forward to when I was older. Maybe it was all for a reason. I don't know. But I remember my first kiss even. I was 12 actually, and I was at the party, same house as the girl with the other party. This was the first one. And I remember my friend Eric, he goes to me, right, Caroline, open your mouth, right, like this like that. So open it like that. And he goes to kiss. He goes, no, it has to be a bit bigger than that. So I did it a bit bigger. And then he goes, and he goes, oh, I thought, whoa, is that what it feels like? And so that was my first kiss. And that was like, okay, that was really nice. And after that, I made a point of doing a lot of kissing as I really enjoyed that, you know.
I love that you had instructions of exactly how
Yes.
to do it because, like, that never happened to me. It was just like finding your way as you go, and everyone kisses differently, and everyone's lips are differently, and everyone's mouth is shaped differently, and teeth clash with each other, doing whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
Or glasses.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's so many funny movies about that kind of thing. But those kind of things do happen, and I think we're kind of scared of that. Like, oh, what is it going to be happening? And that's why we're doing it when we're children. We're kissing another girl at school, or we're kissing our friends, just trying to go, oh, what would it be like to kiss a boy? Because you're talking about boys and talking about relationships and talking about knowing that that's going to come in the future. As a teenager, I was reading Jackie Collins books, and that was where I was learning my sex education
And
and
thank
intimacy.
goodness.
Yeah, beautiful books. They were really wonderful. Like, I read nearly a big portion of that series, actually, or her books. But there, and even watching shows like Days of Our Lives and The Bold and the Beautiful, and those in those days, it was like you saw people having relationships, breaking up relationships, getting together, having affairs. Like, the whole thing was on TV in those shows, and they were interesting. Like, you were in the passion with those people when you were like, oh, this is really nice how they're getting together, and it's steamy and nice. And so they're the only other things that, like, were in my, I guess, available for me as a learning tool. Like say, there wasn't any talk about it at school. We were told we're not allowed to touch, we're not allowed to do things, you're not allowed to kiss, you don't have sex before marriage. Exactly all of those things that we've already touched on. And so when it's forbidden like that, you're going to do it. You're going to do it
Yeah,
more.
you are going to do it. But you're a bit scared sometimes too because it's like a very naughty thing. I
It
mean, I
is.
remember going back to school when we were doing the table tennis table. After the table tennis table, some of them would go to these flats and there was like an area where the gardener would put all his stuff and it was like there were like holes in the wall. So light came in, but there were no windows. And they'd asked me to stand guard. I'd stand guard while they kissed,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Isn't it funny the things that we did? But you know what? It's incredible how we manage to get through. I mean, we still have issues. We all have issues. Some people don't. It really does. I was just talking to my friend who's come with me this weekend to Creamfields because I'm in Chelmsford at the moment, going to Creamfields Music Festival, and we were just saying I mean, this is not talking about sex, about food, but my relationship with food is completely different from her relationship with food because she's got a different upbringing about food. Like I had school dinners and she didn't, so her food, and it's like, God, it's the same with sex. Every
Mm.
single person's upbringing will be different and they'll have a different outlook on it, different thoughts, different feelings, different fears about sex. And yeah, like for example, we had a couple of Sexplosions ago. I had my sexual therapy hold on, she's a sexual psychotherapist, and she came on and talked about it. Now, her upbringing was extremely open, and the way her mother taught, like my dad, when I said to him, I was 12, what dad, what does erotic mean? He goes, go and ask your mother. So my mother said, go and ask your father. So I went back to dad and I said, mum's just sent me back to you. He goes, well, erotic means, right? That was my sex education from my parents. My friend, however, the sexual psychotherapist mother, she was an artist. And the mother drew everything when they were quite young. It was very open. They'd even walk around naked. It was very Roman, I'd say, actually, the
Mm.
way they were brought up, because it was all open. There was nothing that was taboo, nothing that was hidden. Like, I've never seen my dad. I've seen my mum's boobs. I never really saw her downstairs, but that's how it was. You couldn't even, you weren't to show each other. Whereas in her household, so for her, being a sexual psychotherapist was normal. She said, no, it was absolutely fine for me. So when I told her my upbringing, she's like, well, unfortunately, a lot of people have that kind of upbringing. So their ideals on sex are going to be like yours, very similar to yours.
Yeah, well, my
So,
my dad, he used to have his shower and walk through the house naked. It was open in our household when I was young.
oh,
I
right.
saw my mum naked as well. Like my dad was always talking about like nudist colonies and nudist beaches like that he ever went,
Oh,
but I went
wow.
actually when I was a young adult kind of thing. So I mean, it's interesting because now that we're talking about this, is like there were all these rules that I was like kind of like locked into, but then there was this other aspects probably that I did see, kind of like obviously, see my dad walk from the shower to his room without his clothes on and when he was going to bed, or and even like I remember there's one story my dad says to me. He says, we tried to get you kids to go out and play one afternoon so that mum and I could have some time together. And you little buggers were under the window listening, and we could hear you
No,
talking to yeah, talking to
no.
your friends like about what's trying to hear what's going on. And they were just laughing at us like as little children. And we would have been like primary school trying to listen to mum and dad having sex on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it
But did
was.
you know what it was?
No, I don't think we did
Ah,
really. Like, I don't I mean, the dad told me the story. I completely even forgot about
I
it.
see.
But even I found when I was at home, we found my dad had a calendar of naked women and naked ladies, like the, calendar that you could get in those days. And we all used to, me and my friends across the road and my brother, we'd all sneak down to the shed to see where dad's calendar was to have a look at these
I've got a good
calendar
story.
girls. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what? My dad used to have porn magazines in his bottom bedside cabinet drawer, and
Yeah.
I'd often go in there and have a rip through there and have a look
Yeah.
and wonder why we've got them. But actually, also, I actually caught my parents. I think I must have been about, I know, seven. I was small, and I wanted to go downstairs for a drink, and the door was ajar, and I could see that the lights were off, but the light of the telly, I could see the white of the telly light in the room, and I was thinking, "Ooh," and I could hear the telly on,
Yeah.
and I remember slowly pushing the door open and looking, and I saw my mum and dad were doing it doggy style,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Ooh, my parents are having sex." And I just put the door back and just went upstairs, and I was thinking about it for ages, thinking, "Ooh," and at one point, I do remember, now I'm a teenager now, a teenager, so I don't know, 15, something like that, and really understanding now what adults do, right?
Mm.
And it's just terrible. Every time I saw my aunties or uncles, I remember thinking, ooh, you put your willy inside her, and thinking, ooh. And luckily it didn't last very long, but every time I looked at anyone, I was thinking, ooh, he puts his willy inside. Isn't that terrible for me?
I
I mean,
know.
where
And
does that come from?
that's another thing you just brought up. People think like if their parents, like, or the thought of their parents having sex, and I
Yeah,
did see my parents a couple of times because our house was fairly open anyway. Um, and it's interesting because, like, even though I had some exposure over my years, I was never given the tools to support me in what it was going to be like when I was going to start that. And there was always my parents were always afraid that I might have sex before marriage and might end up pregnant outside of school. And that was why it was so
same.
strict in my household. I wasn't allowed to go to parties with other kids. I wasn't allowed to go out at nighttime if there was going to be boys there. I wasn't allowed to go to friends' house if they were going.
Wow.
Like, there was one girl I was friends with, and there was like they were kind of like seen as like a promiscuous family. So because we were so Catholic, some of us girls were not allowed to go and stay at their place, kind of thing. Eventually I was, as I got older, kind of thing, but one girl definitely wasn't. So there was so much strictness around trying to control and keep the children safe from sex, but it just meant that we didn't get to experience life properly. We didn't. You get thrown into situations where you don't know how to set rules or boundaries, and you don't know how to say no. And I think that's, I guess, one of the things that's harder for me is that, like, so you then, I mean, I went, because I was seeing all these things, I was making up ideas. So I was making up this idea that my dad objectified women or men objectify women, right, kind of thing. And so for me, I was under the illusion that women don't enjoy sex and that you're there for the pleasure of a man. And so my experiences started out pretty badly from that perspective,
It
no enjoyment
is.
from me.
No,
Yeah.
and the thing is that that's exactly why it was a treat for them if I went down on them. I did used to enjoy it, and I felt bad about it. I felt bad for enjoying it because
Mm,
I'm a tart then. I'm a
mm,
tart. So I would make a point of not. It's just terrible. And the other thing I was going to say was that if through my 20s, if any man looked at me like a piece of meat object, there was nowhere on this earth that I go, they'll let them come anywhere near me. If they didn't do that and they treated me like, I suppose, like with respect, I guess, is what I'm trying to
mm,
say, then they had every chance. And I was hard to get
mm,
because I've been taught that it's such a bad thing. And honestly, it made me feel sick if they looked at me like I was a piece of meat. But, Marilyn, when I got to my sexual peak, I loved it. I lapped it up. I was thinking, yes, you look at me like that because I'm going to eat you alive, is what I used to think. It's complete opposite.
mm,
And I used to go out. My friend was an air stewardess, and I don't know if you've ever had any air stewardess friends or anything like that, but all the girls that I knew from Gatwick, they all were absolute what I would say was tarts then, because they weren't there when I mean women's sexual peak comes later, but these girls were really on it, and they would be doing it
mm,
left, right, and centre. They didn't even know who the person was they'd wake up with in the morning, and I was the only one that was different. I was the only one. And I remember my friends saying, "Oh, I really admire you because you can say no." But the
mm,
only reason why I would say no is because I didn't want them to. Part of it was I didn't want them to want me to go down them or anything like that. It was like I just didn't want to do stuff like that. I was scared of it. Yeah, I was actually scared of it. I was actually frightened of. First of all, I felt like it's a great big thing inside my mouth, and doing it right, and you
yeah,
know it was just such a whole heap of things going on in my head that I would just not want to do it anyway. So it's a combination of reputation, a combination of fear. It's just, I mean, what the hell? My poor mind, my poor body, everything was just a mess, really, until I woke up and just thought, hang on a minute. And it's only consciousness that helped me with that. If it wasn't for learning about consciousness and understanding that I've been programmed to believe as a child, that I realized, oh, okay, then this isn't quite as bad as I thought. It's just all been made up in my head.
yeah. I also had another experience actually when I was first at uni and I had sex with this one person one evening, and he went back and he told his friends, and they actually gave me a name at uni. They call me Starfish because I didn't know how to have sex. I didn't know how to move or do anything in sex, right? Again, I didn't have any experience and I didn't have anyone talking to me about it. So, and
Oh,
they honestly, they would all just talk and gossip about me at uni. And
that's
so
terrible.
yeah, and so these are the things that are occurring in my early psyche around sex and stuff, that it's bad, you can't do it, like you're not allowed to, and then people laughing at me and
God, it's a
teach you.
whole load of different things that were just putting a big block on it all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually then he told one of his mates to have sex with me to teach me how to have sex. Like it was almost like I was like passed around, so to speak, like in that very first few experiences. So these are setting up my sexual experiences when
It
I'm,
is.
having this in the very beginning. And so it took me a long time to really get to enjoy sex and experience things or experiment or even, I guess talk about it with people and stuff and learn about it. Again, we didn't have anyone telling me how to have sex or showing me, or there isn't any. There was certainly in our sex education at school, we actually taught how to look after a baby, what happens when you have a baby. It was almost like the after sex
Yes.
like
So
there wasn't the how do you have intercourse, how does a man penetrate a woman, what about foreplay, what about all the other things that get you into a relaxed state so that you're going to have a nice experience and you're going to participate and enjoy it. And the things that I do today completely different to what I was experiencing in the very early days. And also when I hit my sexual peak as well, it was like I was like, I had great sex. It was wild and trying all these things and dressing up like you did, and at the opening the door dressed up in the thing or going across town to see someone with the coat on it. I was like the fun things that you do. It's like the role playing and stuff. And so that never happened to me till later in life, till I left my husband and broke up my marriage and started experiencing again. Because again, I started my relationship with my husband from university. So I was 20. I was
yeah.
20 with very limited sexual experience, going into a marriage that I was in for 20 years, basically missing out on all that experimenting time in the beginning, and also didn't get to experiment because I was a Catholic school and I was segregated from boys and I wasn't allowed to go out with boys. So my experiences were so limited when I was on campus at uni. There was a period of time when I first went to university that I would just go out, drink, meet someone, take them back to my room, have sex with them, and then just say, "Can I see you again?" And I'm like, no, I literally was not like interested in, or even I was immature in relationships and understanding that I would just go and find someone to have sex with, and I was like, no, I don't want to see you again. It was almost like I've done it now, I can't see you anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah, isn't that funny how it's because yeah, that's a little bit how it was with me when I was
Mm,
in my sexual peak. I had a different man for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was like
mm,
just crazy. But what I was going to say was that once I had discovered this, I made a point of experimenting. And in fact, that's why my friend does sex parties, is to help women discover themselves. It's to help women learn their own,
mm,
explore their own sexuality instead of
yeah,
having to go to, let's say for example, going to a bar, chat someone up, and it cuts out all that rubbish, and it's just you just go there, and she provides them with a safe environment. And just while you're there, you meet a man in there and you think, right, let's get on with it. And I think that is fantastic for women. A lot of people have the bad idea about sex parties, but at the end of the day, sex parties is because it's still at the end of the day, it's still quite taboo, really. It's like an underground world of swingers and all that stuff because it's just something you don't talk about. It's like I knew some people swinging every weekend. They would have to watch EastEnders so they could go back to their family and say, "Oh yeah, we watched this on Sunday." But actually, what they were doing was having people around for orgies, you know,
yeah,
and it's incredible how I've come such a long way, and now able to you know. I don't know why I speak about it so easily. I always have spoken about it easily, but it's good because you see what's happened on my TikTok and when I talk about these things, all these different. I've talked about fetishes, I've talked about self-orgasm, as I've mentioned, I've talked about car sex, I've talked about everything. And what's really interesting is that people are commenting now and they're realizing actually they're not the only ones that are having the same. You see, and that's what's really lovely. It's because I'm talking about it, they're thinking, oh my God, it is something that other people do. I'm not different. I am normal, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fetish that my husband used to do with me, other people have written saying, "Oh, I secretly like this, and I'm not asked that. I daren't ask anyone because it's like, well, just ask. If they want to do it, they'll do it. If not, they won't do it. It's a choice, and there's no harm in sharing that fetish. If no one likes it, fine, but then you'll find somebody who'll want to do it, you know. So it's interesting, isn't it? And I really hope that things like this podcast, things like my TikToks actually help liberate those locked up fears and blockages that people have got. And we're going to go off to the music festival shortly.
Yeah.
My friends just come in. Anyway, listen, it's been over an hour now. It's been absolutely amazing talking to Marilyn. I really, really appreciate you coming back, and I'm sure the audience appreciate you coming back and speaking your truth. So
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you
And
very much. It's great to be here.
okay, take care, Marilyn. Thank you very much, Marilyn.
Uh,
Thanks very much.